The rise of pop art, 1940s, 1950s. In the years following the World War II, the world underwent an artistic revolution. It was a time of industrial growth, mass production, and an explosion of popular culture. From the streets of New York to the studios of London, a new movement began to take shape, one that would challenge artistic traditions and embrace the imagery of everyday life. This was the birth of pop art. While most people associate pop art with the 1960s, Warhol's Campbell's soup cans, Lichtenstein's comic book panels, the foundation of this movement was laid decades earlier. It emerged in response to the shifting cultural landscape of the 1940s and 1950s, when advertising, commercial art, and mass media became more influential than ever before. The roots of pop art can be traced to wartime propaganda and post-war consumerism. One of the most iconic images of the 1940s, Rosie the Riveter, embodies this shift. Created in 1943 by artist J. Howard Miller for the Westinghouse Electric Corporation, Rosie wasn't just a poster, she was a cultural phenomenon. With her rolled-up sleeves and determined gaze, Rosie represented the strength of American women who entered the workforce during the war. She was bold, graphic, and direct, qualities that would later define the pop art aesthetic. At the same time, artists were beginning to break from traditional styles. In Britain, a group of creatives known as the Independent Group began exploring the intersection of art and popular culture. They were fascinated by American advertising, comic strips, and Hollywood films. In the early 1950s, artist Eduardo Paolozzi created collages that combined images from magazines, advertisements, and science fiction, effectively foreshadowing the pop art movement. His 1952 work, I Was a Rich Man's Plaything, is considered one of the first true pieces of pop art. Meanwhile, in America, artists were shifting away from the seriousness of abstract expressionism. While painters like Jackson Pollock and Mark Rothko dominated the art world with their emotional, abstract works, a younger generation of artists wanted something different. They found inspiration in the visual language of advertising, commercial printing, and everyday objects. This shift was fueled by the rise of consumer culture in the 1950s. Television sets filled American homes, billboards lined the highways, and glossy magazines defined fashion and lifestyle. The imagery of the modern world was bright, bold, and everywhere. One of the key figures emerging during this time was Robert Rauschenberg. Though not strictly a pop artist, his combines, works that mixed painting with found objects, bridged the gap between fine art and commercial imagery. His influence, along with that of Jasper, would pave the way for the explosion of pop art in the 1960s. In the late 1950s, artists like Richard Hamilton in Britain and Roy Lichtenstein in America began incorporating elements of advertising and mass media into their work. Hamilton's 1956 collage. Just what is it that makes today's homes so different, so appealing? Used magazine cutouts to create a surreal yet familiar scene of post-war consumer life. This piece is often credited as one of the first major pop art works, setting the stage for what was to come. By the end of the 1950s, pop art was poised for its breakthrough. The foundations had been laid in wartime propaganda, post-war advertising, and the artistic explorations of figures like Paolozzi, Rauschenberg, and Hamilton. Soon, the movement would explode onto the global art scene, forever changing the way we view everyday imagery. What began with posters like Rosie the Riveter and collages from magazine pages would soon evolve into the bold, rebellious, and instantly recognizable pop art movement of the 1960s, one that would cement itself in art history and popular culture for generations to come.